Welcome back to the world history where forgotten empires breathe again and legends rise from dust. Today we travel back over 850 years to the harsh grasslands of ancient Mongolia, a place of endless wind, golden plains, and unforgiving survival. In the heart of this brutal steppe, under a sky as wide as destiny itself, a child was born. His mother, Holon, held him close, wrapping him in warm furs, whispering strength into his name Temujin. She saw not just a baby, but a survivor, the heartbeat of a future yet unwritten. The child opened his eyes in a small yurt among clustered nomadic tents, with horses grazing outside and wolves howling in the distance. Life here was raw, simple, and merciless. These were the formative scenes that would mold the boy into the storm history would one day know as Changaiz Khan. His father, Yasuge, was a respected tribal chieftain. He stood proud, mounted on horseback, adorned in warrior garb that reflected his status. He named his son after a defeated Tatar enemy, a symbol that even in birth, Temujin was born into rivalry, revenge, and war, according to legend. Temujin was born gripping a blood clot in his tiny fist, a chilling omen. Mongol elders whispered this boy was destined to conquer. Whether truth or myth, it was a sign the steppes would never forget, but fate struck swiftly. While returning from securing a bride for his son, Yasuge was poisoned by the very Tatars he once defeated. Betrayal brewed around campfires as smiles masked death. Temujin lost his protector far too soon. Left alone, Holon gathered her children and vanished into the wilderness. Her clan cast them out, deeming them weak. With no shelter but the trees and no food but what they could scavenge, she taught them to live, to endure, and to fight the cold silence of exile. Temujin and his brothers wandered the forests and riverbanks barefoot and starving, living off roots and hunted rodents. It wasn't childhood, it was survival school. Hunger carved strength into their bones, but suffering bred conflict. His older half-brother Better began stealing food for himself. In a chilling act of justice or desperation, Temujin killed him. The steppes were no place for sentiment. This moment marked Temujin's first taste of control, his first grasp of power. Even as a child, Temujin showed signs of unbreakable will. He learned to use a bow, tamed wild horses, and stared down the wind with eyes far older than his years. In the heart of this isolation, a fire began to burn, quiet, fierce, and destined for greatness. As Temujin grew, so did the shadows of ambition and rivalry. But even in the shifting winds of the Mongolian steppe, friendship offered brief moments of calm. Temujin found a kindred spirit in a boy named Jamuka. Together they raced horses across the plains, their laughter echoing like drumbeats of freedom. In those carefree moments, they dreamed of unity, of greatness, but the steppe gives with one hand and takes with the other. As they aged, so did their ambitions. Ideals began to clash. One believed in bloodlines, the other in merit. As thunderclouds gathered, the two friends stood beneath a storm-darkened sky, still boys, but no longer brothers. Temujin's world now stretched beyond his broken clan. Mongol tribes, divided and bitter, clashed over past betrayals and future power. Within the tribal council or Kurultai, old leaders bickered while the land cried out for a new vision. Temujin watched, listened, and waited. Across the steppe, warriors rode with tribal banners flying high, each loyal only to their Khan. This fractured landscape shaped Temujin's belief that Mongolia could never rise until it stood as one. He turned to the sky for guidance. Alone beneath the stars, he whispered to the eternal blue heaven, the ancient spirit of the steppe. "Give me strength," he murmured, "to change the fate written in the wind." But fate had other tests in store. One would cut deeper than battle. Bort, Temujin's beloved and loyal wife, stood by his side since youth. Draped in the elegant clothing of a tribal bride, she was not only his companion but his anchor. Together they rode, galloping through the moonlight across the endless plains. She wasn't just a figure in his life, she was a part of his destiny. In her strength he found stability. In her eyes he saw purpose, but love was not shielded from violence. One night, raiders from the Merkit tribe stormed their camp, torches blazing, horses screaming, steel flashing. In the chaos, Bort was torn from his arms. The world he had just begun to build was shattered in an instant. Temujin's agony became fire. No longer just a survivor, he became a storm. He rallied his allies, small in number but fierce in loyalty. Standing before them, sword in hand, he spoke not of revenge, but of justice. The battle to rescue Bort was swift and brutal. Under the flicker of torchlight, Temujin's warriors clashed with Murkit raiders. The clang of steel rang through the night, and the firelight painted his face with rage and resolve. When it was over, Temujin held Bort again, scarred but safe. But something deeper had awakened in him. This was no longer about survival. This was the first true test of leadership. The first war waged not just for love, but for legacy. Borte's rescue marked more than a personal victory, it was the birth of a leader. In the flickering light of a new dawn, Temujin stood surrounded by those who had fought by his side. They were not many, but they were loyal. To them, he was more than a man. He was hope on horseback. Now, upon the open steppe, Temujin sat tall on his horse. His armor glinted in the morning sun. Around him, warriors knelt not out of fear, but respect. In that moment they called him Khan. Not of all Mongolia, not yet, but of something greater than bloodlines. Of purpose. High above, an eagle soared its wings, cutting through the wind like blades of prophecy. To the Mongols this was no accident. The eternal blue sky had begun to favor Temujin. The spirits whispered, this was the one who would change everything. Night fell across the plains. Firelight danced across Temujin's face. He was quiet now, staring into the flames. His eyes were different, older, sharper. The boy who once starved in the forest was gone. In his place stood a man carved by pain, betrayal, love, and battle. Then came the first oath. A warrior, rough and scarred, knelt before Temujin and offered allegiance not out of fear, not for gold, but for belief. One by one, others followed. The fire of unity had begun to spread. Across the steppe, the tribal map shifted. No longer just scattered bands, these warriors were slowly forming something new, something dangerous. Temujin's influence moved like the wind, invisible but impossible to resist. He trained them hard. Under his command, warriors learned to ride like shadows and strike like thunder. He taught discipline, loyalty, and tactics never seen before. It was no longer about surviving, this was about reshaping the world. But every flame attracts a rival. Jamuka, once a friend and now a bitter enemy, stood against him. Their paths were never meant to run parallel forever. It was inevitable. A face-off loomed, one born of fire, the other of blood. Temujin raised the black banner, an ancient Mongol symbol of war and unification. As it whipped violently in the wind, warriors gathered beneath it, their chants echoing across the hills. The time of tribes was ending. The age of the Khan had begun. Now, alone on a ridge, Temujin gazed across the land. The sun rose behind him, casting long shadows over the grasslands. His eyes scanned the horizon, not in wonder, but in recognition. Everything he had lost, every wound, every betrayal, had led him here. The boy who once had nothing was now the man the world would never forget.